Before this story begins, take a second and imagine this: a quiet stage, thousands of people watching, judges waiting with doubtful faces, and a small boy who looks like he hasn't eaten properly in days. No one expects anything from him. Not the audience. Not the judges. Maybe not even himself. But what happens next will leave the entire room in tears. So before we continue, if you love stories that touch your heart and remind you that miracles are real, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this deserve to be shared with the world. The bright lights of the stage seemed almost too big for the boy standing in the middle of it. His name was Miguel Santos, a 13-year-old boy from a small fishing village in the Philippines. His clothes were simple: a slightly oversized white shirt, faded jeans, and worn sneakers that had clearly seen better days. His hair was messy, and his hands trembled slightly as he held the microphone. The audience whispered among themselves. Some smiled politely. Others looked confused. The judges leaned forward, trying to understand who this shy boy was and what he was doing on such a massive stage. One of the judges asked gently, "Miguel, tell us a little about yourself." Miguel swallowed hard. His voice was soft, almost fragile. "My father, he was a fisherman," he said slowly. "But his boat was destroyed during a storm last year. Since then, things have been difficult for us." The entire room became quieter. Miguel continued. "My mom works 2 jobs, and I help take care of my little sister. Music is the only thing that makes me feel like everything will be okay." The audience listened closely now. Another judge asked, "Why did you come all the way here to audition?" Miguel looked down for a moment. Then he said something that made the room completely silent. "My mom always says that sometimes the smallest voice can carry the biggest dream. I wanted to prove her right." A few people in the crowd already wiped tears from their eyes. The judges smiled kindly. "Well, Miguel," one judge said, "the stage is yours." Miguel took a deep breath. The music began. A familiar guitar intro echoed softly through the theater. At first, some people didn't recognize it. Then suddenly it clicked. He was about to sing Hotel California. A few people exchanged surprised glances. It was an iconic song, powerful, complex, and extremely difficult to perform well. The judges looked slightly concerned. Could this shy young boy really handle such a legendary song? Miguel closed his eyes. For a brief moment, the entire world seemed to pause. Then he sang. On a dark desert highway. The first note floated through the air like something magical. The audience froze. Heads turned instantly. Because the voice coming out of that small, nervous boy didn't sound like a child at all. It was deep. Rich. Soulful. It carried emotion so powerful that people felt it in their chest. The judge's eyes widened. One judge slowly leaned back in his chair, completely stunned. Miguel continued singing. Every word carried pain, hope, and passion that seemed far beyond his age. The audience began to realize they were witnessing something extraordinary. People who had been whispering before now sat perfectly still. Some leaned forward. Others held their breath. As Miguel reached the chorus, his voice soared through the theater. It was strong, controlled, and unbelievably beautiful. A woman in the audience covered her mouth in shock. Another man whispered, "This kid is unbelievable." The judges looked at each other with expressions that said everything. None of them had expected this. Not even close. Miguel's confidence slowly grew as he sang. With every note, the nervous boy standing on stage began to transform. His posture straightened. His voice grew even more powerful. And for those few minutes, he wasn't just a poor kid from a fishing village anymore. He was a star. The audience began clapping along softly. The energy in the room changed completely. People were smiling. Some were crying. One of the judges actually shook his head in disbelief. "This is insane," he whispered quietly. Miguel closed his eyes again as he approached the final part of the song. This was the most difficult moment. The high notes. The emotional climax. Everyone wondered if he could pull it off. Then it happened. Miguel delivered the final chorus with a voice so powerful that it sent chills across the entire theater. The note rang out like lightning. Pure. Beautiful. Unforgettable. For a moment after he finished, there was silence. Complete silence. Miguel slowly opened his eyes. He looked nervous again. Maybe he thought he had made a mistake. Maybe he feared the judges didn't like it. But then suddenly, the entire theater exploded. The audience jumped to their feet. A massive standing ovation filled the room. People were cheering, shouting, clapping louder than ever before. Some were wiping tears from their faces. The judges stood up too. One of them actually looked emotional. Miguel stood frozen on stage, completely overwhelmed. He had never heard applause like this before. One judge spoke first. Miguel, I have judged thousands of auditions in my life. But that was something very special. Another judge added, your voice carries so much heart. It's not just singing, it's storytelling. Miguel's eyes began to water. The third judge leaned forward and said something that would change Miguel's life forever. You walked onto this stage as a quiet boy nobody expected anything from, but you're leaving this stage as someone the world will remember. The audience cheered even louder. Miguel wiped a tear from his cheek. He thought about his mother working late at night. About his little sister waiting for him back home. About the small wooden house near the ocean where he had practiced singing every evening. And suddenly he realized something. Dreams don't belong only to rich people. Dreams belong to anyone brave enough to chase them. One of the judges smiled warmly and asked the final question. Miguel, are you ready to hear the results? Miguel nodded nervously. Yes, said the first judge. Yes, said the second. And then the third judge smiled widely. That's 3 yes. The crowd erupted again. Miguel covered his face with his hands as tears streamed down his cheeks. He had done it. The poor boy nobody believed in had just taken the first step toward his dream. Backstage, the host hugged him and asked how he felt. Miguel smiled shyly and said something simple that made everyone emotional again. I just hope my mom is watching. And somewhere far away in a small fishing village in the Philippines, a mother sat in front of an old television with tears in her eyes, whispering proudly, "That's my son." And that is the moment everyone in the theater realized something powerful. Talent doesn't care where you come from. It doesn't care how poor you are. Sometimes the most incredible voices come from the most unexpected places. So if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because stories like Miguel's remind us all that no dream is too big, and no voice is too small to change the world. Before this story begins, imagine this for a moment, a huge stage, thousands of people watching, bright lights everywhere, and in the middle of it stands a skinny, nervous boy in worn-out shoes. The judges don't look impressed. The audience isn't expecting much. Some people are even whispering that he might not last 10 seconds. But what happens next will leave the entire theater in complete shock. And before we continue, if you enjoy emotional stories that inspire millions of people around the world, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another unforgettable moment like this one. The night was already full of big performances when the host called the next contestant. Please welcome Daniel Cruz from the Philippines. A small boy slowly walked onto the stage. Daniel was only 12 years old. His white shirt looked slightly too big for him, and his jeans were faded from years of use. His shoes had tiny cracks along the sides, the kind that told a story of long days and difficult journeys. He looked around nervously. The stage lights were brighter than anything he had ever seen. The judges watched him carefully. One of them leaned forward and asked gently, "Hi Daniel. You look a little nervous. Tell us about yourself. Daniel gave a shy smile. My name is Daniel Cruz. I'm from a small village near Cebu in the Philippines. His voice was soft. My family is very poor. My father used to work at sea, but he got sick and can't work anymore. My mom sells food on the street so we can eat. The audience became quiet. Daniel continued. Sometimes we don't have electricity at night, but I still practice singing outside under the streetlights. The crowd reacted softly with sympathy. One judge asked, So why did you come all the way here to audition? Daniel looked down for a moment, then said something that touched everyone in the room. I want to help my family, and I want my parents to see that their sacrifices were worth it. The audience began clapping gently. Another judge smiled and said, That's very brave of you, Daniel. What song will you be singing today? Daniel took a deep breath. I will sing Hotel California. The judges raised their eyebrows. It was a legendary song, made famous by the band Eagles. It wasn't an easy song for anyone, especially a young boy. The music started. The famous guitar intro filled the theater. Some audience members exchanged doubtful looks. Daniel closed his eyes. Then he sang. On a dark desert highway. The moment the first note came out of his mouth, the entire room froze. His voice was deep, smooth, and incredibly emotional. It didn't sound like a child at all. One judge's jaw slowly dropped. Another judge whispered, Wait, what? Daniel continued singing. Every note carried feeling, pain, hope, and determination. The audience slowly leaned forward in their seats. The sound of his voice seemed to fill every corner of the theater. It was powerful but gentle at the same time. A woman in the crowd placed her hand over her heart. Someone in the back whispered, That kid is amazing. As Daniel reached the chorus, his confidence started growing. His voice soared higher and stronger. It felt like the entire audience was being pulled into his story. The judges looked at each other with complete disbelief. One of them shook his head slowly, smiling. No one expected this. Daniel kept singing with everything he had. You could see the emotion in his eyes. It wasn't just a performance. It was his life. Every note carried the struggles of growing up poor. Every word carried the love he had for his family. The audience began clapping along with the rhythm. Some people were already standing. Others were wiping tears from their eyes. Then came the hardest part of the song. The final chorus. The moment where most singers either shine or fail. Daniel took a deep breath. For a second, the entire theater went completely silent. Then he sang the final lines with unbelievable power. His voice echoed through the stage like thunder. The note was perfect. Strong. Emotional. Beautiful. And the moment he finished, the theater exploded. Thousands of people jumped to their feet. The standing ovation was deafening. The judges were standing too, clapping with huge smiles on their faces. Daniel looked completely stunned. He had never heard applause like that before. His eyes filled with tears. One judge spoke first. Daniel, I honestly didn't know what to expect when you walked onto that stage. The crowd laughed softly. But what we just heard was extraordinary. Another judge added, You didn't just sing that song, you owned it. The third judge leaned forward. You came here as a poor kid with a dream. But tonight, you proved that dreams don't care where you come from. Daniel wiped his tears. He tried to smile, but the emotions were overwhelming. The judge asked the question everyone was waiting for. Daniel, are you ready for the results? Daniel nodded nervously. The first judge said, Yes. The crowd cheered. The second judge smiled. That's a yes from me. The audience got even louder. Then the final judge paused for dramatic effect. Daniel held his breath. The judge grinned. And that's 3 yes. The crowd erupted with excitement. Daniel covered his face with his hands as tears streamed down his cheeks. He had done it. The boy who once practiced singing under streetlights had just won the hearts of thousands of people. Backstage, the host asked him how he felt. Daniel looked at the camera and said something simple but powerful. I just want my parents to have a better life. Somewhere in a small home in the Philippines, his mother and father were watching through tears of pride. Their son had just shown the world something incredible. That talent can come from the smallest villages. That hope can grow even in the hardest circumstances. And that sometimes, the most powerful voice in the room belongs to the person nobody expected. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because the next incredible story might inspire someone else to chase their dream too. Just imagine this for a moment. The stage lights turn on, the crowd is restless, the judges are tired after watching dozens of performances, and then a tiny boy in worn-out clothes slowly walks onto the stage. Some people in the audience smile politely, others whisper to each other, clearly not expecting anything special. But within the next few minutes, that same boy will deliver a performance so powerful that the entire theater will fall completely silent, and then explode with emotion. So before we begin this incredible story, if you enjoy heart-touching moments that prove dreams really can come true, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss stories like this again. The theater was buzzing with energy that night. It was another audition day on the famous stage of America's Got Talent. Hundreds of contestants had already tried their luck, hoping to impress the judges and change their lives forever. But no one in that audience had any idea that the next contestant would be someone they would remember for a very long time. The host stepped onto the stage and smiled at the crowd. Please welcome Marco Reyes from the Philippines. From the side of the stage, a small 11-year-old boy slowly walked into the spotlight. Marco looked incredibly nervous. He wore a simple blue shirt, slightly wrinkled, dark jeans that were a little too short for his growing legs, and old sneakers with faded laces. His black hair was messy, and his eyes kept glancing around the massive theater as if he couldn't believe he was really there. The audience gave him a warm but gentle applause. The judges leaned forward with curiosity. One of the judges, Simon Cowell, looked at the boy and smiled slightly. Hello there. What's your name? The boy gripped the microphone with both hands. My name is Marco Reyes, and I'm from the Philippines. His voice was quiet, almost shaking. Simon tilted his head. And how old are you, Marco? I'm 11 years old. The audience reacted with soft ah sounds. Another judge asked kindly, So Marco, tell us a little about your life back home. Marco took a deep breath. My family lives in a small village near the ocean. My father used to work on fishing boats, but last year he got injured and can't work anymore. The room slowly grew quieter. My mother sells vegetables in the market every morning, Marco continued. Sometimes I help her before going to school. The judges listened carefully. Marco looked down at the floor for a second. Music is the only thing that makes my parents smile when they're tired. A woman in the audience wiped a tear from her eye. Simon leaned forward again. So Marco, what are you going to sing today? Marco hesitated slightly before answering. I will sing Hotel California. A murmur spread across the audience. It was a legendary song originally performed by the band Eagles, known for its powerful melody and complex vocals. Even experienced singers found it challenging. Some judges exchanged uncertain glances. Simon raised his eyebrows slightly. That's a big song. Marco nodded nervously. Yes, sir. Simon smiled gently. Well, good luck. The music started. The famous guitar intro echoed across the theater. Marco closed his eyes for a moment. You could see his chest rise and fall as he took a deep breath. Then he sang. On a dark desert highway. The very first note sent a ripple through the crowd. People who had been whispering suddenly stopped. Heads turned instantly toward the stage. Because the voice coming out of that tiny boy was unbelievable. It was smooth, deep, and filled with emotion. Simon's eyes widened. Another judge slowly leaned back in shock. The audience stared in disbelief. Marco continued singing, each word flowing perfectly with the music. His voice carried a maturity far beyond his age. It felt like every note came straight from his heart. The entire theater grew quieter and quieter. Some people leaned forward in their seats. Others simply stared at the stage with amazement. As Marco reached the chorus, his confidence began to grow. His voice became stronger. More powerful. More emotional. The crowd started clapping along softly. Simon looked at the other judges and whispered, "This is unbelievable." Marco stood in the spotlight, singing with everything he had. For those few minutes, he didn't look like a shy poor boy anymore. He looked like a star. The audience could feel his story in every note. The struggles. The hope. The love he had for his family. By the time he reached the final part of the song, the entire theater was completely captivated. This was the hardest moment. The final chorus. The note that would decide everything. Marco took a breath. Then he sang it. The powerful note rang through the theater like a wave crashing against the shore. Perfect. Emotional. Beautiful. And the moment the song ended, there was complete silence. For just 1 second. Then the entire theater erupted. The crowd jumped to their feet in a massive standing ovation. People were cheering, clapping, and shouting with excitement. Some were crying. Others were simply shaking their heads in disbelief. Simon stood up slowly, still looking stunned. Marco looked around the theater with wide eyes. He couldn't believe what was happening. One judge spoke first. "Marco, that was absolutely incredible." Another judge added, "Your voice has so much emotion. It's rare to hear something like that from someone so young." Simon stepped forward and smiled. "When you walked onto this stage, I think everyone, including me, expected something small." The audience laughed softly. But what we just heard was huge. Marco's eyes filled with tears. Simon continued. "You have a gift. And more importantly, you have heart." The crowd cheered again. Simon then asked the question everyone was waiting for. "Marco, are you ready for the results?" Marco nodded slowly. The first judge smiled. "Yes." The audience clapped. The second judge laughed happily. "That's a yes from me." The crowd got louder. Then Simon paused for a moment, looking directly at Marco. Finally he smiled. "And that's 3 yes." The theater exploded with excitement. Marco covered his face as tears streamed down his cheeks. He had done it. The boy from a small fishing village had just stunned the world. Backstage, the host hugged him and asked what he was thinking. Marco looked at the camera and said quietly, "I just hope my parents are proud." And thousands of miles away, in a small house near the ocean in the Philippines, a mother and father watched their son on television with tears of pride running down their faces. Because that night, the world learned something important. Great voices don't always come from big cities. Sometimes, they come from the smallest villages. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because the next dream waiting to be discovered might be even more incredible.